Hi, and welcome to Self-Generated. My name's Steve. I'm the host and creator of this podcast, and you have come across our first official episode. It's going to be one of 3 that'll be available at launch. On this episode, we're going to explore the ideas of perception, the basic frameworks of how we might see, hear, taste, touch, how our senses work, what those experiences are. Now, in case you missed it, there was an introductory episode before this in which I went briefly into who I was and why I'm doing this. I really do suggest you circle back and have a listen at that. But if you're one of those ain't nobody got time for it type of people, then the short version is I'm just a regular guy. I'm not claiming to have any special academic access or privilege or degrees. I haven't written a bunch of books on the subject. I haven't spent years in a lab. Just a regular person like you who's looking at scientifically published information and going to share it. And I'm going to share a series of ideas that I believe, with logic and time and a little bit of help, can be used to fundamentally change the way you view your life, the way you live your life, and it has fundamentally changed my life for the better. And it wasn't a gimmick, it wasn't a game, it was a lot of work, and it starts with the understandings that we're going to share over this podcast. Now, in order to start it, or any journey, in order to start, you got to start somewhere, and for me, it's been perception. I don't really know where else to start. It's fundamentally how you're experiencing me right now. You're perceiving my voice wherever you are. You can hear, you can see, you can touch, you can taste. Anything that you can experience is essentially a perception. It's what make us. Even when you recall things, when your memories, you're recalling perceptions. You're reconstructing your perceptions. And these things work in a very particular way, and they define us. But one thing I think is kind of funny is that for the most part, if I asked you right now, what is perception to you? How does your perception work? How do you hear me right now? How do you see anything? How do you hear anything? How certain are you of your perceptions? How much can you trust them? When I ask you those questions, do you easily come up with responses? Or is it something that gives you a little bit of discomfort or disquiet? I think it's kind of interesting that such a formative and important aspect of our day-to-day lives gives us such pause and challenge in reflection. And that the average person really, it's kind of a hard question to ask. But if you have any answer, please do the right internet thing, help the podcast, help me, help the audience, and share that. If you're watching this on the YouTube version, put it in the comments. You can hit us up on our subreddit, Self-Generated Podcast, or pretty much any of the socials at Self-Generated Podcast. What do you think perception is? What is the certainty you give your perceptions? How much do you trust them? How do you see? How do you hear? What's a good answer for you? Now, even if you don't want to share it, that's totally fine. No one will ever find us because the algorithm hates stuff like this, but it's okay. It's okay. Either way, I would like you to hold on to your version of the answer, your answer, because we're going to circle back at the end. And I feel that it's very formative. It's very important what you think perception is for you. And we'll explain that at the end. Now, your perceptions are a lot of things. For most people right off the bat, it's your senses, right? Like your seeing, your hearing, your taste, your touch, all of your perceptions, the things that come to your awareness that you perceive, your emotions, your sensations. And we don't necessarily we think of some of these things as being purely physical. When we think we missed something on the table, we think maybe I didn't see it, but there's a lot more to the aspects of seeing and hearing and all of our experiences than this pure mechanical mirror of the outside world being projected to some sense of us. I mean to confirm and to say that our perceptions, your perceptions, my perceptions, all perceptions, none of them ever are 100% reflections of the outside real physical world. They just aren't. They never have been, they never will be. But we live, more often than not, like it is. We'll do a quick little breakdown of just you hearing me right now. Now, in order for me to have recorded my voice, I had to input it into a device. It had to go through different convergences of files and editing until you finally downloaded it and listened through your headphones. But let's just say I was sitting opposite you in the room right now. My vocal cords would vibrate the air, would move across to your inner ear, and those vibrations would be converted into information. They would come in through your three little bones with funny names to this small little sac called the cochlea, which is about the size of about a pea, has about 10,000 hairs on it, and then the movement of that hairs is encoded into information and sent to the brain on a signal that is not labeled. The brain is on its own in the dark confines of the skull, and the only thing it has a relationship to is context of what's happened before from these signals. So in that experience, where to you does it jump out that you're experiencing 100% reflection of reality through hearing my voice? It's all right, I'll wait. Now, for some people, when I go over that example, they think maybe perhaps it's just a fluke of sound or hearing. It's a bad example for me to use, but let's just say I was sitting opposite you and you were looking at me through two working eyes and you were experiencing seeing my face. Now, if you were experiencing seeing my face as the light bounced off of my face in through your eyes in the organic process that it would work, you'd probably be unhappy. What do I mean by that is that your experience of sight is very different than purely the sensory information coming in. One, you can kind of break this illusion very easily yourself by crossing your eyes very quickly. Feel free to do that. Please don't puke or feel uncomfortable, but just do it for a moment and you can tell you dispel the illusion of a singular movie screen-like experience. Now, your eyes themselves, that when this light comes through, it has to go to the back of your eye, to the retina, in a very centered little area in the fova, which is where pretty much is your best focus, best color, best everything. Now, the periphery of your vision is kind of colorless and blurry. And in fact, if you think about it, your eye is not just the lens right up front. There's a bunch of material. There's blood cells. There's blood vessels going through your eye. Now, the light has to go through that. There's also a big optic nerve that would create a big dark spot kind of off center that would also be a bit of an issue when you're looking at things. If you actually experienced looking at me purely as the light coming in through your organs of your eyes, you'd probably be very unhappy. Though it might actually help the way I look, but that's just me. That's unrelated. The basic idea is that your experience of vision is an amalgam of things, and it is not at any point 100% window to the outside world. This is not just a fluke of particular senses or perceptions. It's everything. Your sense of taste. It's not just the molecules of the food hitting your tongue and then being transcribed in some sort of experience in your mind. Think about if I give you your favorite food in the whole world, but I give it to you and you're in a shit house. You're in an outhouse. I scare you. I tell you about somebody that you greatly appreciate and love has just passed. Is that going to taste the same? Is that going to be the same experience? No. It's because the totality of the experience of taste is not just the molecules of hitting, molecules hitting your nose and your tongue. Another way to think of that when it comes to taste is when you're sick. Things will taste differently because you can't smell them, and it's not something you necessarily notice otherwise. But your senses are generally more an amalgam of things. For example, how confident are you that you have experienced wetness as a 100% reflection of reality? How confident are you of that? Well, what if I told you you've never, in fact, actually directly experienced wetness? You have no hydrometer in your skin, right? Your experience of wetness as you know it is an amalgam of the sensation of touch, the motion of the object, the viscosity, the texture of the object, the temperature. Those are the things that create your sensation of wetness. If you were able to directly tell wetness, you wouldn't have to, put the clothes out of the dryer against your face to tell if they're dry. You wouldn't have noticed that you're sweating only when that breeze hit. It's actually, you only notice it because of the temperature differential, right? Your experience of wetness is an experience that is generated from your mind, from your senses, but not entirely of your senses. Are we starting to see a pattern here? When it comes to your sense of temperature, How many times have you picked something up and thrown it down thinking that you've burned yourself and you haven't been burned?
What's in here? I told you, you've been bitten! Burn the fucking...
You haven't been burned. Well, one thing to know about temperature and the way you perceive it is it's not uniformed over all of your skin or your organs. It's usually in patches, and it's also up to a certain temperature. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if something is over, I think it's 45 C or about 107 degrees Fahrenheit, you no longer experience an increase in temperature, you experience pain. Same thing for low 30 degrees Fahrenheit, close to 0 degrees C. You experience, instead of degrees of getting colder, you experience pain. Even at a threshold where you're not necessarily getting damaged at that moment, that's just how you experience things. Because you're not experiencing 100% reflections of reality, your experiences are generated in your mind from these signals, but not entirely of them. All right. Now, a big problem, or the big hiccup when people describe this, for the most part, is at this moment right here, this threshold. And now I'm going to try my best to try to cross it better than others. But for most people, once I say that your perceptions are not reality, everybody shits the bed. They freak out. It's because it becomes this black and white thinking that if it is not 100% reality, then it's nothing, right? If you don't believe that your perceptions of reality, step in front of a bus and see what happens. That's nonsense, right? That's part of our societal conditioning. That's part of our biological imperative of very simplistic, quick reasoning, right? But it's not helpful. What I'm going to try to describe is, think about it instead of black and white. Just because it's not 100% reality, think of it as 80% reality. Think of it as 50% reality. It is not devoid of reality, but it is certainly not mostly reality. It is, in fact, mostly what you think reality is. Hold on to that for a second. Yep, that's what I'm saying. Your perceptions, your experience, your emotional responses, these things are in tune with what you think is going on, not necessarily what is going on. And now a brief moment to acknowledge our non-existent sponsor.
In today's fast-paced world, who has time to actually go out and protest? Introducing the Insta Protest Kit. Now you can support any cause from the comfort of your own home, or even better, your favorite coffee shop. Each kit includes a selection of customizable protest signs, a range of hashtag stickers to make your message go viral, and, for a limited time, our exclusive reusable tear-free protest tear bottle. Because nothing says commitment like fake tears on social media. But wait, there's more. Upgrade to our premium kit and get the virtual reality protest experience. Stand in the middle of a protest from anywhere in the world without risking a sunburn or needing to know what you're actually protesting about. Share your activism instantly with our one-click social media integration. Watch the likes, shares, and supportive comments roll in as you fight for justice, one post at a time. Insta Protest Kit. Because if you didn't share it, did it really happen?
And now back to our show, currently in progress. Now, that might be a bit heady, that might be a bit tough, that might be a big bite to chew, but that's what we're going to crunch through the rest of this episode when we're talking about perception. So when I say that your perceptions are not just the reflections of what's going on 100% outside, but reflections of what you believe is going on, what do I mean by that? That your interpretations of the world are based off of how you model and understand the world. Now, we're going to have to go into this in depth in the next episode in active inference, but to do a real quick version, I'm going to try to put up a video or an image of a kid who is struggling, a little child, think of a toddler, who is struggling to figure out how to use some part of their body. By that I mean like bring their thumbs up or do a coordinated action, right? Now, in case you can't view it on the YouTube, or if I didn't get one because I'm new at this and I kind of suck, think of this, a child sitting down, struggling. You can see them thinking, their face is all scrunched as they struggle to wring their hands until finally their thumbs come up, and then the excitement on their faces, they show off that they have successfully used their thumbs, put their thumbs up. Now, when we look at this, it does kind of classically look, or we can interpret it as that this kid is figuring out how to use his hands. This child is trying to figure out how to use their hands. And I think that that's a very accurate way to look at it. What we're talking about here is an active inference and predictive processing that, in a way, through embodied cognition, we build models of our world, our bodies, everything, so that when we interpret light coming from a particular direction, because we live in a particular way, if you live inside and you interpret most of your life and you develop an innate interpretation of lighting conditions versus living outside, you will experience very different versions of the blue dress. I'm putting it up on the screen. It's the classic optical illusion that kind of circled around, I think a little prior to pre-COVID. And some people see it as white and gold or blue and black. But what we're talking about here is that interpretation, that experience of seeing it in those different colors, comes from the models built of how lighting works for that individual. It's not just the picture. That's why you see it different. You've built different models of the world of how lighting is. Just as this kid built a model of his hands and his body, you've built models of your world and your understanding. And when we go through things like optical illusions or the experience of optical illusions, classically we kind of think of it as a funny, fluky way that we see our system being tricked. But the reality, or what you should think of it as, is it's a window to the real functionality of how our perceptions work. All right, and we're going to go over that a little bit right now. As far as illusions go, they were always something that as a kid I thought were really cool. You might remember the Muller-Lyer illusion. You might not remember it by that name, but it's the illusion where two lines that are equal in length. I'm going to have it up in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it right now. The illusion shows two lines with opposite-shaped arrows at each end of the line. And you experience one being longer than the other due to the direction of the arrowheads, even though the lines are actually technically the same length. I probably used to that one as a kid, or Rubens' vase. You might be familiar with that one, where it's seeing a vase in the center of an object. It's a black and white image. Then if you look at the left or right, you see two faces looking at each other, and you can experience one versus the other, kind of switching between the two. Think of kind of the magic eye illusions, things like that. If you look at it just in the right kind of way, you experience it in a different kind of way. And that these illusions, as fun and as cool and as weird as they seemed, are actually, now I understand, slightly differently. I experience them differently. I don't experience them as much as weird, because when I would like to say that you're experiencing it as an odd thing, this is weird. Weird against what? It's weird against what we infer or what we believe that our perceptions are, which are actual representations of reality, windows to what's going on outside. So that's why something like the Gonzaga triangles, these are an illusion where the mind perceives the contours of a white triangle on top of a background composed of three black circles, each missing a sector. And essentially, you experience a triangle that's not there because it's implied. You can do that with holes and all sorts of other objects that the surrounding drawing environment looks like it could be it. You experience it as such versus experiencing it as exactly what it is. And that's kind of the point that we're getting at, is that these illusions are not us acting weird. That sense of it acting weird is only because we have a model of it should be something else. And that this, again, is a reflection of how we actually work. That Rubens' vase, the face vase illusion, the hollow mask illusion. It'll be up here again. I'm going to represent that one. And if you are looking at the inside of a mask, the hollow inside of a mask, you can experience seeing a face not unlike just a regular face. The reason being, again, is your experience is not just the visual information coming in. It is from your expectations. You don't see faces in convex, hollow ways inside of masks. You don't experience that regularly. So why would you experience it normally that way? You would expect to experience it how it is if your perception is a direct reflection of reality. But if it's a reflection of a generation of models and understandings, what you expect, this makes sense. So I'll reference a few others. Most of these you may be familiar with, like the checker shadow illusion. Essentially, think of a checkerboard with an object casting a shadow over it. Same color squares will look and appear to be different colors. You can even put up a bar of the color for reference over both of them to connect, and the illusion is broken, and you realize that it is in fact the same color, but you experience one as darker. And the reason being is because it's not about just the information coming in, it's about the construction of what you believe it is. That's how our experiences are shaped. The Hermann grid illusion. You have a grid of black squares separated by white spaces. The intersections are not directly looked at. When you don't directly look at them, they look kind of gray. Now, there's no color actual spillover. It's not just a fluke of your eyes, the color bleeding over, as it were. It's part of the inhibition system in the visual system. It's part of the window to how you actually process things, not as literal as you might think. It's not just on the pen and paper illusions that you see. Even prior to CG, we used to have to use some of these illusions and these forced perspectives for cinematic narratives like Willow and Lord of the Rings. Some of those shots are very similar to the idea of the Ames room illusion, which is a distorted room that is constructed to create an optical illusion where people or objects appear to grow or shrink when moving from one side to the other or around in the room. I'll try to find this one single shot of in Lord of the Rings when they were filming it, the forced perspective to make these people look little. And again, how is that possible? It's because our perceptions come from a certain thing, not direct reflections. Right? It's not the light bouncing off of your eyes onto the projector screen in your mind. It just doesn't work that way. And it's not just vision. It can be hearing. It can be other perceptions as well. The McGurk effect. Short version is that if I were to say the letter D, D as in dog, D, 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 but I were to visually show you me saying the letter B, B as in boy, B, 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 if you look at my lips while hearing me, you're more inclined to hear B or experience the B than the D sound. It's called the McGurk effect, because part of your processing and experience of sound is not just the actual hearing. I'm going to put a little other one here. It's from TikTok. It's this British girl, or I think Scottish. She's deaf. But when she talks, she has a bit of an accent. And it's because she's not learning the emulation of the sounds from hearing, but from watching the mouth movements of her mother, so that or caregiver, and that creates the emulation of an accent, even though she can't hear it. The thermal grill illusion. It's a series of little bars, size of straws, that you put your hand on, kind of like a little space-age scanner looking thing. Each bar is wildly different in temperature. Nothing that would damage you, wildly different. Very hot, very cold, very hot, very cold. When you put your hand on that, you experience pain. Because it's not that it's actually doing damage, but because your system doesn't know what all these alternating pieces of information are, it's going to err on the side of caution, and you're going to experience pain when there should be no real pain. Nothing's doing you any harm. But because your actual experience of pain is not just a physical reflection of what's going on, it's a construction, that's a window to it. I'm a big fan of this next one. A lot of people aren't familiar with it unless they've studied it in college, is the rubber hand illusion. The basic idea is the participant sits, they have a rubber hand in their own hand, and through particular manipulations and interactions, they can actually experience a sense of touch when the rubber hand is being touched. There's even very funny videos of it online. Most of the ones that probably have any views are of when people are scared into the rubber hand being attacked by a knife or a hammer, and they pull back as if it is their real hand. Now, we look at that as like a funny little, oh, these people are stupid or how goofy or whatnot, but it's a reflection of active inference and play, and how that we build our interpretations of the world. It explains phantom limb. It explains so much. It explains active inference. These are windows to predictive processing and active inference. And then we collectively act that they're weird and quirky only because they act weird and quirky against a story in which we believe we work, which clearly is not true. Now, I don't want to just continue to rant on about all of these various illusions, like, is it pareidolia? I think that's it. I probably butchered it. It's one of my favorite ones. Again, I don't mean to pick on ghost shows, but I have a fondness for them. And that's the idea that when you hear the grubble noise, and then you overlay a saying over it and you hear it again, And you're able to then impose the experience of hearing that saying, and you can't undo that. And that is a reflection of how we actually work. And I'm going to wrap it up with one more visual illusion that I'm going to give a couple of references to that really kind of button up this idea of these things being more windows unto our actual nature than just funny, fluky games and interesting stuff. And I know there's tons more, so please feel free to put your favorite one in the comments or hit us up on the socials at Self-Generated Podcast, especially if you have examples. Love to see them. But what we're going to talk about is Mooney images, Mooney faces. Now, the super basic idea is that you see an image in black and white. It can be a face. It can be anything, really. But you're seeing a very overly simplified version of the image. And you can't really make it out. It's just, what is this? This is blotches. Then, when you see the color illustration, the color version of this image, oh shit, it's a XYZ. I'm not going to say it so I don't ruin it for you. Most people have seen these, but go ahead and take a look at the illustrations. Follow the link. The basic idea is that once you then try to go back to the black and white one, you can never experience it the same. That's the whole point, is that once you now know what it is, once you've seen it in a deeper way, even when you look at the more simple version, you can never go back to that not knowing experience of looking at it in that way. And that is core to our actual nature of how we work. It's not just fluky, it's not just funny. It's core to our nature. You can never look at that black and white image again. Once you've seen the color, once you realize what it is, you never fundamentally experience it as that first time as that unknowing, blobby black and white image. No matter what, you can't. You can't turn that off. And that is a window to predictive processing. That is a window to how you actually work. That's why when you see a car for the first time or you find out about it, I used to sell cars, so I use cars as an example, but you would see a car for the first time and then you see it everywhere on the road, or you can have that with an ad or a product. Or you see it the one time you learn about it and then all of a sudden it seems to be everywhere. Well, it's not so much that it's everywhere, it's that you have missed it. Most of your perceptions and what comes to your awareness is based off of what you predict. So if you don't predict or understand it, you can literally not see it. That's one of the core reasons why we are talking about all of this, is that we assume it's purely mechanical and that if our eyes are good, we will figure it out. We examine it in kind of funny, silly ways in the social media, like things like, why can't guys find things in the fridge? Is it a factor of being male, not being able to find something in the fridge? What I'm saying, it's a factor of predictive processing. If somebody doesn't put something away, if they're not familiar with it, if they're not comfortable with it, if they don't model it, if they don't know what it looks like, it'll be difficult to impossible for them to easily, quickly find it in a space, because it's not purely mechanical. It's not purely that women have more color vision or better color vision than men. It's that we explore this idea in these funny, silly ways versus actually taking a real long, hard look at the reality of what these things are, what our perceptions are, and what it means. If you don't see something, if I walk by and I've missed my keys on the table, it's not just because I didn't see them. It's because I didn't perceive them, because I didn't predict that they would be there. That's how you miss things that are in the open. It's not just because your eyes are crappy, right? I'm a little older, so my eyes are getting crappier, but it's in no small part based off of your expectations, your models of the world. You're not going to look in a place where you wouldn't predict. You're not going to see something there innately that you didn't predict. It takes you a moment. You have to be open. If you're quick, if you're moving through, you're not going to stop and notice those small little details. And you won't think about it at all if you think that your perceptions are direct reflections of reality, without exception. And now, a quick break, sponsored by no one. Welcome to Hideous Horseless Carriages, the last car dealership you'll ever need, or want, to visit, that is. Why? Because once we lock you into those sky-high interest rates, you're practically family for life. Little credit, bad credit, no problem. Your job can be your credit. Your mom can be your credit. Your uncle, whether he knows it or not, can be your credit. we can find a solution for anybody willing, especially with money down. Money down. It can solve problems. We'll say no money down, but wait till you get here. Worried about super high interest rates? You shouldn't be. We prefer to call them loyalty fees here. And as long as you're loyal to us, we're loyal to you. But if you're not loyal to us, please note that in your contract it says that we have a GPS device in your car. We can stop you from being able to turn it on, and we know where it is at all times. And when you end up signing a contract, aka our loyalty pledge, you get to choose from an exclusive range of vehicles, from recently salvaged, slightly singed, or just recently repossessed. You have plenty of options here at Hideous. Hideous Horseless Carriages, where your desperation meets our opportunism. Visit today and drive something away. And now, back to the show. But one of the most important aspects of the Mooney face illusion, as I had illustrated, is once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, this is part of this whole process, is once you start believing and understanding and knowing and truly modeling your world in a different way, you experience it in a different way. You then start seeing these things again and again, the patterns of our own consciousness at work, at play, at your work, with your boss, with your kids, with yourself, with your own interactions with other people, with history, with everything, bit by bit. So that's the one and only warning I'll give you, is once you start seeing and knowing and learning, it's almost impossible to honestly go back. It's just like the Mooney image in that you can't unsee, you can't go back to that experience of not knowing once you know. So I know we've gone over quite a bit so far, but let's button up a few more things, as I said before, when it comes to the understanding that a lot of our aspects of our perceptions we can see for ourselves are not direct reflections. So I can lead a bunch of examples and references to papers, but what about a couple things you can check for yourself when it comes to vision, just right now? So when I had talked earlier about our vision, I had said that all of the light that's coming into our eyes, only really a small area is actually clear and in perfect color and captures that movement. And it's literally probably about the size of your thumb at arm's length. And what I mean that by the back of your thumb, if you have decent vision, it's somewhere between 18 inches to arm's length out. So for example, if you wrote one letter on one thumb, on your left thumb, and one letter on your right thumb, and you put them together and extended your arms out in front of your face, all the way out, you wouldn't be able to move your left and right arm very far apart from each other before you would not be able to see both of the letters at the same time. That's your actual focal point. So actually, if you want to test it, it's a real easy thing to do. Go ahead and just grab something, put a sticker on the back of one thumb, sticker on the back of the other. You can realize that your focus, your actual ability to see, your clear vision where you can read and tell everything is very small. And everything else is kind of fuzzy. Most of the time we don't really play with that, but that's really where you can break the veil and see for yourself that this experience of visual perception is a little different than one might think. To give a bit more of a scientific reference, there's something that we know. Our brains don't process our visual information, the information coming from our eyes, where our eyes are moving. Now, I'm going to leave a link of the studies and so forth, but this is something you could probably see for yourself or think of it for yourself, and it actually makes quite a bit of sense that if you were actually taking in all that information and experiencing the visual information of your eyes moving, you'd probably feel pretty sick. Think about it. It would be blurry, it would be disconjointed, it would be out of focus. And the reality is your eyes are constantly moving. Even if you don't necessarily think about it, if you were to record your face for a period of time while you were looking at a screen, you could see that our eyes move in these rapid saccades or eye movements that are not as fluid as we would think or experience our vision as. But that the basic idea is every time your eye moves, you should technically be blind, but I'm pretty sure for you, it's the same as I am. I don't experience any blindness during the day. I think some studies say it's somewhere between 45 and 90 minutes of blindness would be experienced if you were experiencing blindness every single time your eyes moved. Now, have you ever experienced watching your own eyes move? I'm not talking about on video. I'm saying if you go stand up in front of a mirror right now and try to experience watching your own eyes move. Or if you don't have a mirror handy and you have your phone or your device and you have your flip camera looking at the screen, trying to experience seeing your eyes move while you're moving them. And you can't, because you are not actually processing the visual information as your eyes move. But you don't lose the experience of sight. That's because your experience of sight is not just what's coming through your eyes. There was a PBS special. I'm going to leave a couple thumbnails up here and courtesy and a link to. And I'm only doing that mainly because, as I said earlier, I'm new to this and I honest to God have no fucking idea how copyright or fair use works. So I'm going to try to verbally describe most of this, and then otherwise you can look at this for yourself. But what it is a reference to an experiment where a person is able to sit in front of an adaptive screen, a screen in which it tracks the person's eye movements. The person places their head in a stationary position. It tracks their eye movements, and it's able to adjust what's on the screen based off of the person's eye movements. So if somebody was looking at an image and they had just the fova, or the center, about 40% circle of that whole image is nice and crystal clear, and the rest could be blurry. And as long as that crystal clear part of the image moves with the person's eye movements so that it's always at the center, the person looking through the screen, going through the experiment, will not experience anything different in their vision. While you and I, who are sitting here, can look and see that only a fraction of the screen is actually clear. If we were doing writing and we made the rest, everything that's not within that center of vision, X's, it would not inhibit the person's ability to read at all. Because we are not experiencing sight as this giant movie screen is everything. It's a small little snippet that is constantly being sampled, and then the totality of our experience of sight is generated. It's not devoid of reality, but think of it more as a caricature than an HD, 4K, 8K, 90K picture. Does that make sense? When I say make sense, let's give a practical application to this. I used to be real into ghost hunting. I'd mentioned earlier I'm in my 40s now. In my early 20s, I'd run around with a few different groups, just enthusiasts, and a few attempts at doing pilots for shows on pretty much paranormal investigations, but real lowbrow, low-budget stuff. And during all of my time running around, I had always hoped to have a really strong paranormal experience. Alas, I was never able to have one myself, but once I had started to understand some of the aspects of active inference, I really started to realize and change some of my interpretations on my past experiences, because I realized that my sense of what I'm actually perceiving is in no small part tied to what I expect and my models of my world, my affect at the moment. So if I'm sitting in a room during the middle of the day, as I am now recording, with all the normal pops and cracks and noises with the light of day and activity going on, I don't necessarily feel anything, versus the experience I might have at 2 a.m. after being tired and cold, coming in with the mindset that hopefully something interesting will happen, and that every single pop and crack and creak all of a sudden has the potentiality for sentience and purpose and meaning and something more. And it fundamentally changes the experience, almost like a thrill ride, really. And in that understanding, I realized that my experience of all these things, even if a ghost were to come and slap me on my backside, I wasn't 100% sure if I could be sure if that's what happened. And, I'm not trying to discredit anything here, because I do understand that I don't have 100% access to reality, so I could have missed stuff. I might see things differently than others, and I'm not just trying to backpedal. I mean that. I understand my limitations of what I can experience and how I can take in reality. But I also understand that a lot of these things, as we explore them, seem to add a layer of context and understanding that wasn't there before, and helps make sense of a lot of things made no sense to me before. I was just going through the motions. That being one of them, that my experiences, how I saw my friend's face in a crowd, thinking of how keen my eyes were versus the fact that I have models and understandings and I predict to see him. It's a familiar pattern. So that's why his face came to my awareness out of the crowd. I know what that face looks like. That's why seeing that face changed my experience because of a history, right? It's not just friend vibes being sent on emotional waves through his eyes. I'm constructing these things in totality: pain, pleasure, love, compassion, hate, anger, sight, hearing. These are all generated. These are all constructed. They're not devoid of reality, but they're not of reality completely. They just aren't. They're of us. They're of our interpretation of reality. And we have to take a moment, a paused moment, to realize that, because that can change everything. And that's what's changed my life in no small part, is the enacted understanding of these things, starting with perception. When I would perceive or take note of my physical, emotional responses to situations, my first step in being able to separate and process those experiences was to know that these things weren't just happening to me, that it wasn't 100% true, that me feeling shitty about myself was not helpful. It wasn't from some greater power. It was from the narrative I was deriving. I wasn't able to let go and grow and heal until I was able to figure those things out. And it started with my perceptions. Because everything I experience, every thought that comes through my head, every word that comes across my lips, starts in some way, shape, and form from this amalgam that is me. And these perceptions are not just the windows to the universe, they're windows to my universe. How I perceive things, what I think is true, what I value. That's why we can put a picture of 1,000 different things up on a wall and have people come, and every single person can have a different experience, different things that might come to their attention. And then we can try to categorize the ones that come to the attention most and amongst which groups, and we think that has some sort of mechanical meaning and that shows exactly how we work. But the reality of it is that we're much more software than we are hardware. We keep trying to look for these very simplistic, mechanistic, mechanical explanations for our experiences, when the reality is far more not hardware, but software. Things that we create, that we learn, that we develop. The human frame hasn't changed much in the last 50,000 years, but our mindset has changed a lot, even though our actual mechanical, biological brains probably haven't changed much at all. And that's probably because most of this stuff is learned. It's behavior, it's societal. And it's so ingrained that it's hard to differentiate. It's hard to tell. But that's why you need to be aware of your perceptions. Because if you expect to see something, you expect to see boogeymen, well, you'll definitely find boogeymen. You expect to find bad guys, well, then you'll find bad guys. You expect to find good guys, you'll find good guys. What we're trying to do is stop trying to expect, and let's start interpreting what you're actually experiencing. Let's look at things a little different, from a slightly different perspective. Let's learn how to pause. Let's learn how to be more comfortable with things that are uncomfortable. And let's learn to explore the world with a new set of eyes, with a new level of clarity. But most importantly, we're going to try to learn how to explore ourselves. Because a lot of these interpretations, these sensations, these feelings that we're having, we always feel that it's something happening to us, and we come up with the reasons why. But really, another thing we can do, and what I'm going to try to help teach, and what has helped me, is to figure out how we can interpret what we're experiencing as what it means to what we believe to be true. What is it about our model of the world that is being challenged so much so at this moment that I'm experiencing this distress? And it's not so much what can I do about it, but what can I think about it? I'm not talking about an instantaneous pull off the Band-Aid, everything is fixed. That's nonsense. I'm talking about creating yourself like a marathon runner or an athlete would over time, with practice, with conditioning, with realization, with growth. But that growth comes from this first step, understanding that your perceptions, you have to be more comfortable with the idea that they're less than 100% of reality. Being willing to be uncomfortable for moments with just ideas to explore and grow as a person, and that we might work in a way, as counterintuitive as it sounds, I can show you again and again and again, there are reasons to realize that this is possibly, or more accurately, probably the case. And in this next episode, which will be available right after this one, we're going to look more in depth when I'm talking about models and these signals. Like, if, for example, when I say emotions, that you're feeling these things, what are they when it comes to active inference? What is active inference? What is predictive processing? Now, I'm not going to be able to describe it all in an episode, but I'll be able to give you the gist. And I do appreciate if you did like this episode so far, that you do the good internet thing and you like and you subscribe and you leave comments or reviews, or you hit us up on a social, or you share this for somebody that you might like, or share it with somebody you don't like. But the basic idea is that this is not going to rise on its own. This is something that if you find it interesting, I would greatly appreciate you sharing, because this is not just content to me. I'm done with content. There's enough content out there. What I'm going to try to do, to the best of my ability, is create context creation. Right? We live in a time that is challenging, where it's hard to tell what's fake and real, and that craziest bullshit can just go on as normal, and no one seems to bat an eye. Literally living in a theater of the absurd is a common idea right now. And we need to figure these things out now more than ever. At least that's how I feel. And I feel everything I'm going to share with you up until this point and further has fundamentally given me a set of skills and an ability to deal with the world that I was not able to have before. And I'm not special. There's nothing mechanically, genetically about me that is unique that would allow me to do this that you can't. It's willingness, it's time, it's perception, it's consideration, and it starts with you. And that fundamentally, however you want to look at it, if you want to be more at peace, if you want to be more in control of yourself and your life, if you want to rule and not be ruled by feelings, if you want to be free, then sit down, have a listen. Self-Generated Podcast.